This is a demonstration of using AJAX for a web program. We're going to go through exercise 15.6 from this textbook. It uses an example program that's provided in figure 15.8. And the way this web application works is it's a web page where when the user clicks on a radio button, it brings up images of the titles of all the books in that category. And we need to really make sure we understand this program well before we make any modifications to it to try to satisfy the requirements of the program exercise. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about how XML HTTP requests work or the objects we create from that class. But in general, AJAX has a client component and a server component. You notice that we didn't have to refresh the page. The update happened on the fly. So the client and the server work together to provide a seamless experience for the user where different parts of the page can update using the DOM model with responses from the server. At this particular one, we see when the radio button is checked, there's a call to a function that passes an XML file. So we're going to go through this JavaScript and find out where that function is, and there it is. Set the URL. The code is actually going to try, which is a good idea with AJAX in case there's a problem with the server. We want to handle it gracefully. And the way that this works is it calls a process response function when there is a ready state change for the service request. So the response has an if statement, and it creates a variable called covers to handle the data that comes back from the server. It looks at the XML for a tag named covers, and it also uses a tag base URL. So we're going to have to look at those in the XML before we get too much further. So there's an all.xml, a simply.xml, and a few different XML files that we need to look at to see how it works. And these files have to be located on the server. And in this case, we're looking at the same directory as the HTML file. So here they are for that example program. I'm going to look at the XML. There is that base URL tag, so that's the other server that is hosting these images. It's just going to get a different image URL for a different JPEG for each of those covers. So you can see the cover element of the XML. Again, I can't go into too much detail in this video about XML, but it's very useful technology to know about with AJAX. Alright, this one wants us to modify it so a title attribute is shown for each cover. And I do give you some tips to solve this exercise in your assignment. To approach the problem one step at a time. You want to do one little thing, try to get it to work, and then build to it. So first, I suggest creating a div to hold the title and setting the ID for the div to be able to identify it with DOM. Right? So fortunately, if we've examined the previous code, we see that there already is a div being created, and we can just modify it. So I'm going to copy the source, because I was just looking at it in the source view of my web browser. I'm going to paste it in Notepad++ so I can start making modifications to solve this exercise. And I see down at the bottom there is a div for the covers. That's an area of the HTML that's going to hold the covers. And we could put the title anywhere we want to, but I'm going to put it underneath the covers. And I'm going to give it the title. I'm going to give it the ID of title, because that's where I'm going to show the title of the book. And that's going to be helpful for DOM. Now we want to get the title for the book the same way we get the images for the book. So we're going to look more closely at the HTML and see how exactly are those images, the URLs for those images being retrieved from the server. And this line seems to have something to do with that. The variable covers is being created to hold the response where we're getting the elements by the tag name of cover. Remember our XML where we saw the cover was one of the attributes, one of the tags. We want to get the title instead. So I'm going to create a variable and call it title, and I could call this anything I wanted to. But what's inside the inside the double quotes here has to match the tag name exactly. So I'm going to double check my XML document, and the title tag, that is what it's called, it's title. And that's the data that we want to use in our web page. So inside the double quotes, I'm going to put the word title. The variable that I used and the name for my, the ID name for my div, I could have made those whatever I wanted to. Now that we have a place to put the title, and we have a div created to hold the title, we need to actually change the HTML inside of the div to show the title. And this is just using DOM. And if you're not familiar with DOM or a little rusty on it, you might need to go back and review it. But here's some DOM being used for the covers. I'm going to borrow that code and make some modifications to it. And where exactly I put this, you might need to think about, or you might need to put it somewhere and then try to move it later. But let's just try to put it here at the end of this if. Right? And rather than getting the placeholder for the covers div element, we want to get the placeholder for the title element. And we'll just call that the title output. It's just a place that's holding a DOM object for that div element. And I want to modify the inner HTML of that location to have it output, and I want to set it to my variable title. The variable title that I created earlier, which is holding the title that was the response from the AJAX request. And I'm going to save this. I'm not going to try to solve the entire problem at one time. I'm just going to do one little thing at a time and see the effects to see if I'm on the right track or not. And so I'm going to save this file that I'm working on locally. I'll save it to my hard drive. I'll put it on the desktop. It's on these Notepad++ knows it's an HTML file. We'll get all the nice color coding to help us. I'll just save it here to my desktop, and then we will need to upload it to the server, because with AJAX, the server and the client are interacting with one another. And it's using teamwork type thing. So we need to upload this to the server before we can really test it. And we need to make sure all those XML files come with this HTML file that we're working on. So I'm going to just copy my sample code that was provided with the book. I'm going to copy that whole folder to my hard drive. I'm going to change the folder name to something like exercise 1506. I'm going to upload that back to the server. Now it has all the same files in it, just a different folder name, different directory name. And I'm going to put my HTML file that I was working on into that folder. The full images onto page should still work fine, but I want to test my full title onto page. So I'm going to go into my web browser, and I'm going to modify the URL that the browser is looking at. And we'll see if the code that I wrote is doing what I wanted to do. That looks good so far. And I do see some text underneath the titles, but that doesn't look like a title of a book. It looks like it's got a collection. So perhaps it's that title variable is holding too much information that it can't display. It's not really a title, it's a collection of information. So we know we need to make some kind of change. And based on that output, perhaps it has something to do with getting too much information at one time, or not just getting one title for a book, or getting multiple titles perhaps. So let's try moving where we get the title. Now, let's not get the title every time. So let's not just get it here at the top. Let's move it into the for loop. Let's try putting it into the loop. That way, each time we go to retrieve a cover, we'll also retrieve a title. That makes more sense. See here how this is where it's actually retrieving the cover. It's getting that image. Let's try going here to get the title. I don't know if I just pasted, but I'll copy and paste where we're getting the image from, and try to get the title that way. Now this might only get the title for the last book. When I output my title here, it'll go through the for loop and it'll get the title for each book. But the way it's set up, if you think about it, it's probably only going to, when I get to the output after the loop, it's only going to hold the last book title. So I'm going to upload my revised file that I was just working on. Go back to my browser and refresh it. And when I check the radio box, ooh, now I do see a title. But as I thought about it, it's showing me just the title of the final book of the collection, of the array basically that got created with all the titles. That's all we're going to do in this video. In the next video, we'll work on getting the title to change and meeting the rest of the specifications.